மத்திய நிதியமைச்சர் நிர்மலா சீதாராமன் செய்தியாளர்களை சந்திப்பதற்கான ஆயத்த பணிகளில் ஈடுபட்டு வருகிறார். அந்த காட்சிகளை நேரலையில் பார்க்கிறோம். இது தொடர்பான விவரங்களை நம்முடைய செய்தியாளர் கணபதியிடம் கேட்கலாம். கணபதி, இந்த சந்திப்பு மிகவும் முக்கியத்துவம் வாய்ந்த ஒரு சந்திப்பாக நீங்கள் ஏற்கனவே குறிப்பிட்டிருந்தீர்கள். குறிப்பாக எந்த துறையினரெல்லாம் தங்கள் துறைக்கு தற்போது ஏதேனும் அறிவிப்பு வரலாம் என்ற எதிர்பார்ப்பில் இருக்கிறார்கள்?
பெரிய தொழில்துறைகள் அனைத்துமே மிகுந்த எதிர்பார்ப்பில் இருக்கின்றன. குறிப்பாக வாகன உற்பத்தி, 4 சக்கர வாகனங்கள், 2 சக்கர வாகனங்கள், பொருட்களை ஏற்றி செல்லும் பெரிய வாகனங்கள் மற்றும் இதை தவிர ஸ்டீல், சிமெண்ட் போன்ற அனைத்து முக்கிய துறைகளுமே தங்களுக்கு ஏதேனும் முக்கியமான சலுகைகள் தற்போது கிடைக்க வேண்டும் என்று விரும்புகிறார்கள்.
Good evening. Is that okay? I just want to give a bit of an opening to this, as I see, much expected press conference. I'll have the Finance Secretary help me in going through the slides. I just want to give you a picture of how long it's going to be so that you're not going to be frustrated in between. There are about 32 slides. And just so that you get a picture of how we are going about this whole thing, I've arranged them in about 6 compartments. So as we move, I will alert you to the fact that I've covered one and I'm moving to the second, so that related items are grouped under one head. And even before I start doing that, just to briefly give you a picture of what's globally happening. The slide before you shows that the global situation is very clear, and the current projected global GDP growth is of about 3.2% and probably is going to be even revised downwards. Moreover, not just one, many organizations have come out repeatedly to say the global demand is going to be very weak. So that's one broad picture. The lines there show you very clearly what is the growth globally and where India stands in that. You can see the yellow line which stands for India is still very much high above. The United States and Germany have seen inversion of yield curves, which points to slowdown in growth of consumption in these countries also. So it's not a story just of the emerging economies, but even global advanced economies are facing this. And obviously, being in India, we normally get compared with China. So as a result of the US and China trade war and subsequent currency devaluation of China, very volatile situation has developed in the global trade. These are nothing new for you, but I just wanted to place it as a larger context with which we are speaking. And therefore, if you see the 10 major economies of the world, the size of the, the balloons or whatever, bulbs, show the size, and from among the emerging economies, the size of the economy, and therefore where they stand globally today. So the size of the circle represents the GDP as per PPP and the current international dollar terms. So you see India again in yellow, positioned comfortably very high. The growth rate still in comparison to many of these countries high, and if anything, even compared to China and the United States, our growth rate is higher than everybody else. So let's just keep that at the back of our mind, even as we go through this. One thing I just want to draw your attention to is the important line which the Prime Minister keeps repeating because he strongly believes in it, which came out in one of the newspaper interviews that he had given earlier, saying, "We respect wealth creators." I want to very clearly put that before you, to underline that that's the spirit with which the budget was presented, and that's the spirit with which we immediately invited different sectors of the economy to come and speak to us if there's anything that they wanted to say. And they were not very quick, short consultation for the sake of it. They were in-depth consultation, some of which ran for even a couple of hours. And all our secretaries were together with me during those consultation process, which ran through a whole week. And many of you all kept following us closely on that. I was happy for that. And just so that we again put this fact in context, that this government, even from 2014, has kept reform at the top of the agenda. It's an ongoing process for us. It's not as if in this tenure, post-2019, we've forgotten the reform agenda. Not at all. Reform is a continuous process, and we are treating it as a continuing endeavor. And therefore, just so that we don't forget that even simple small things to fairly complicated levels of ease of doing business related reforms were carried out by this government in its earlier tenure, continues even now. Whether it is self-certification, whether it is looking at environment clearances, just compare the time that an environment clearance took in earlier regimes and what is happening now. We've not lost that momentum. We are keeping that high on our agenda. And about the labor reforms, taxation reforms, irrespective of any other one or two points that each one of us might have, this could have been better this way, that could have been better that way. In spite of that, we have kept that momentum, and I'm just recalling that so that we don't forget the fact and we don't treat it as, we have taken it for granted, which is good. Indian economy and the society should take for granted many things which relate to ease of doing business and ease of living too. And that's the agenda with which we are moving forward. We have not slowed down, or we have not even forgotten that. With that said, you can see in the slide that we provided here that continuously efforts are being taken by each one of the departments. Taxation, I'd like to draw your attention before I get into specifics of other things, just so that this makes the backdrop to everything which is being talked about. Is this government going to care for us? Is this government understanding what is happening in the ground? Is this government responsive enough to the changes which are coming? We are responsive. I want to assure everybody that the momentum with which we want to carry forward reform will continue. Just to draw your attention for a few things that are happening here. Pre-filling of IT returns. Revenue Secretary has been talking about it. Now, the ease with which you can file your returns will be a lot more simplified if it is all pre-filled and all that you have to do is to change any corrections that you have to make. So that strain is off you. Similarly, there will be faceless scrutiny from Vijayadashmi Day this year, which will mean that there shall not be even that one odd, I don't want to use the word, but for want of a better word, one odd over-enthusiastic officer who might go and, sit and talk about things which may be construed as harassment. That will not happen because the whole process is going to become faceless and it will be randomized. So it's not going to be that everybody is going to be a faceless scrutiny will happen. No, it will be randomized. Big data details are being utilized. So for somebody who's got to be as scrutinized, let's say sitting in Noida, his assessment might go to Assam. So faceless scrutiny is something which is coming in from Vijayadashmi Day. Reduction of GST returns and simplified taxation and also the number of forms is really being worked upon, and I surely assure you sooner the GST will come up with even more simplified and less number of forms. The refund process, I must underline here, has almost become automatic. Glitches where they exist, even yesterday when I was sitting with the tax administrators, I very clearly said the refund should be going through as a process, free flow. But if there are obstructions to it, we are very clearly, even tomorrow I'll be holding a meeting with, tomorrow Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, I'm holding a meeting with the GSTN people to make sure and identify as to where the glitches are in terms of flow of refund so that it doesn't affect people. And if we think that the system is being gamed or if there are tweakings manually being done, I have assured that we shall take action against anyone who's gaming the system. That's as regards the refund process for the GST simplification. And then finally, repeating one other thing which I mentioned along with the faceless scrutiny is risk-based approach is being taken in dealing with the taxpayers where there is high risk, where there is suspicion based on ground factual records. Action will be furthered rather than approaching everybody with a fishing expedition, as it were. So there are simplifications being done in the taxation. Labor laws, I'll just very quickly go through because you know fixed term employment has been facilitated so that there will be flexibility in hiring. Contribution to the ESIC has also been reduced to 4% from 6.5%. Web-based jurisdiction-free inspections are happening. Inspection report to be uploaded within 48 hours. So there shall not be any delay. And this is enabled already. And offences. Again, a very important point from the point of view of how we are approaching ease of doing business. Compounding of offences will be the priority, no other prosecution-based actions, and self-certification, which I've already said. Environment clearances, there is a single air and water clearance for MSMEs, single consent to establish a factory for MSMEs, so it's actually moving towards greater simplification and doing of business. Then corporate affairs, I just want to very quickly draw you to say that these are ongoing endeavors. We've not forgotten. I just want to draw the attention of the House before I move on to specifics, which I've already told you, 6 different headings in which I will give you my inputs. You can see that one day to incorporate a company is what is now the norm rather than an exception. Integrated incorporation forms are available. Shifting of 16 offense sections to monetary penalty has happened. So the angle that this government is going to harass people or this government is more inclined to go through prosecution is being disproved in every case that we've taken up. In every case, meaning in every act-related or rule-related position, we are more in favor of compounding of an offense, and where penalty can play the role, it is penalty rather than prosecution. This is the second example where we can tell you 16 such offense sections have all been taken as monetary penalty-based rather than prosecution-based. Faster and easier approvals are being given for mergers and acquisition, some of which I'll explain further. Modifications and provisions for differential voting rights, about which I'm very grateful to the media. A lot of you all have written about it as to how that will bring in a certain sense of ownership for the people who founded the companies, and that will give them the right to retain their control of their own companies. Withdrawal of over 1,400 prosecutions under Companies Act. Again, a point where I want media. I'm very grateful that you've been writing about it. We are inclined to move from the prosecution route to more humane approach. Repeatedly examples before you to prove that, and therefore I would want to request companies and also media to see that the intention of this government at no point wants to pursue anything in the name of prosecution. Here are the examples concrete, which is not happening today, but over the last few weeks, we can very clearly tell you that that's the kind of step that we've taken. The IBC framework, all of you are very familiar. Even as the budget session was going on, even as all of us were focusing on budget-related matters, because of the way in which certain interpretations were given by some authorities and tribunals, we had to go through very quickly amending the IBC just so that no anomalies existed, and that has, as much as possible, we can get information that has benefited the MSMEs and home buyers. We shall ensure that we keep going in that route. So with this backdrop, I now go over to my first silo, which relates to respecting and honoring wealth creators. CSR violations, about which all of us have been hearing, not to be treated as criminal offense and would instead be a civil liability. Ministry of Corporate Affairs will review the sections under Companies Act. Government has provided companies through revised orders time for completing ongoing projects towards fulfilling their CSR obligations. So every doubt that was prevailing outside, I would want to dispel it today, that there is no intention of the government to go on the prosecution route. CSR will only be treated as a civil matter and not at all as a criminal matter. The second point there in my first silo is issue of IT orders, notices, summons, letters, etc., shall now go through a centralized system. What does that actually mean? It means on or after 1st October 2019, all notices, summons, orders, etc. by the income tax authorities shall be issued through a centralized computer system, and it will contain computer-generated unique documentation identification number. Some of you all have already started writing about it, great sense of what is coming. But what actually it means is, if there is a notice being issued at the ground level, and some amount is being claimed on an SSC, that without a central approval cannot happen, and also the amount stated there will eventually either be resolved or resolved in favor of the authorities, and therefore the tax will be paid or the claim will be settled, but the amount shall be what was claimed and not more or less. And this will be available for the assessee himself to see it, so that he knows what he is being asked. If necessary, he can even quote that and complain, so that there are no anomalies in paper and actual practice. So this is one way in which we think the harassment angle can be addressed in favor of the assessee. The second, any communication issued without computer-generated unique document identification number, the DIN number, that shall be treated non-est. In other words, if anybody has issued from his own level, at the ground level, that notice shall not be treated. Actually, the assessee can put it aside and say, I've not received any note, nobody is going to follow him up. Unless the notice goes through the central clearance, and unless the notice has a DIN number, the document identification number, it need not be taken seriously by any assessee at all. So let's make that very clear. And all old notices, the question naturally arises, you announced this, what happens to those which were given earlier? All old notices to be decided by 1st October 2019 or uploaded again through the system. So all the notices which have been issued till now will be cleared before October 1st, 2019, within 1.5 months from now. And if in case some of them will have to be treated again, they'll be uploaded again, and only then will it become a valid document for action. So assessees can be very clear, it is now a transparent process. This is very important. Things are not going to keep hanging fire. All notices to be disposed of within 3 months from the date of reply. Let's be clear, no assessee will have anything to do with any notice after 3 months once he's given a reply. So that's on the first silo of respecting and honoring our wealth creators. We shall go through a very transparent process. The next one is on the taxation measures that we are coming up with. The much awaited taxation measures that we are coming up with. The much awaited yes, please. Relief from enhanced surcharge on long-term and short-term capital gains. In order to encourage investment in the capital market, it has been decided to withdraw the enhanced surcharge levied by the Finance No. 2 Act of 2019, the recent budget time, on long and short-term capital gains arising from transfer of equity or shares and units referred in section 11A and 111A and 112A respectively. In other words, the enhanced surcharge on FPI goes. In simple words. In other words, the pre-budget position is restored. Surcharge on domestic investors too in the equity market goes. Pre-budget position is restored. So, can we go to the next? Or do you want to you don't want to hear anything more?
Yes.
No, we are going on the others also. Okay, now, I am using an expression which is used commonly, but it's not something part of the ministry. Things about angel tax provisions. That's not an official expression for the tax that we are referring to, but never mind, all of us understand what angel tax refers to. So to mitigate genuine difficulties of startups and their investors, it has been decided that Section 56(2)(b) of the Income Tax Act shall not be applicable to a startup registered with DPIIT. So, the section which is invoked and through which startups had difficulties, but that section is important for the income tax for many other reasons, so the section continues, but that section shall not be applicable to registered startups. All right, now this is done, but after this, if there's a difficulty, it has also been decided to set up a dedicated cell under a member of the CBDT. The CBDT chairman is here, present in the audience. A member of the CBDT will head a cell under him for addressing the problems of startups. A startup having any income tax issue can approach the cell for quick resolution of the problems. So that way, we have made it clear that it shall not apply to startups who are registered with the Department of Industry and Internal Trade. Not only that, but further, there will be a member who will be handling it from the CBDT. We move to the next, which is my third silo, which relates to measures that we are coming up with for the banks, for NBFCs, and for MSMEs. Additional credit expansion through public sector banks. This is something which we did announce during the budget session. Upfront, we are releasing the 70,000 crores. Upfront, we are releasing the 70,000 crores and additional lending and liquidity to the tune of 5 lakh crores can be made available by providing this upfront capital for the PSBs. This was announced in the budget. We are doing it upfront now. And this will, we are very clear that this will benefit all the corporates, retail borrowers, MSMEs, and small traders as well. So we'll also tell you that we are closely working out the ways in which this flow will happen, how it will flow through the NBFCs and so on in a later slide. But this is the first one which we want to tell you. Next. Banks have been discussing with us. You know that the first discussion one Monday happened with the banks only. Banks have now decided to pass on any rate cut through the MCLR reduction to benefit all borrowers. It's a decision which the banks have made. I'm very grateful because during the consultation, we emphasized on the total, irrespective of the segments, people saying that the benefits of rate reduction don't reach them at all. Or if it reaches in trickles, or if it reaches, the trickles last over several months and years. So there was this across-the-board grievance that interest rates not being passed down to the customer is affecting, in spite of Reserve Bank having brought it down several times. So now we are very grateful all the banks have agreed and they said that they shall pass on the rate. The next one is, this is more important and that will explain the previous point that I've made. Banks again have decided to launch repo rate or external benchmarking linked loan products. Only a few days ago, the governor of Reserve Bank had spoken about it. He was talking about institutionalizing this mechanism, was also still hoping that the banks would work on it. Now, banks have agreed to do this, and I really want to put on record my appreciation of the Finance Secretary, who has been sitting and engaging with the banks to convince them that today's environment demands that the banks become a bit more reasonable on this, and this will therefore result in reduced EMI for housing loans, vehicles and other retail loans by directly linking repo rate to the interest rates, which means the moment the reduction has happened, it will directly benefit the customers, end customers. Working capital loans for industry will also become cheaper as a result. Go over to the next, customer ease. In order to reduce harassment and bring in greater efficiency, public sector banks shall ensure mandated return of loan documents within 15 days of loan closure. Most often, people who came and spoke to us said, look, we finished the loan, we've brought it to a closure, but our documents, the security related documents are not being given to us. It was a demand of every segment which met with us during the consultation, and therefore we've worked together with public sector banks and come to today's situation where within 15 days of the closure of the loan, the documents will be given to the customers so that he can do anything else with it afterwards. It shall now not be held unreasonably by the banks. So this will benefit all those customers who have mortgage documents in the banks and they are sitting without being able to release them. I go to the next point, again under the banks and NBFCs, again on the customer ease, online tracking of loan applications by customers of retail, MSME, housing, vehicle, working capital, limit enhancements, all of this will be covered. They can track it themselves online. So there's no need for them to wonder saying the application made, nothing has turned up, we don't know where it is lying. You track it like we would do with a courier parcel, I suppose, as to where it goes at which stage. So this would increase transparency, reduce harassment. There shall not be a need for people to go knock at different doors to say, where's my loan application? And this will also improve the turnaround time for customers. The next is talking about banks to issue improved transparent OTS policy, one-time settlement policy, to benefit MSME. This is not theoretical. This is not an abstraction. We are not just saying, oh, banks will improve transparency. How will they do it? For settlement of one-time loans or one-time loan settlements, we are approaching it with a checkbox approach. If a client has complied with certain requirements in one sheet of paper, use a checkbox system and there and then settle for the one-time settlement, rather than say somebody else will have to take a call, we'll have to pass the paper on to somebody else and come back and waste time. If the checkbox approach is taken up by MSMEs and they go about ticking the box and giving it to the banks, there's no reason somebody else should come to decide the matter. The banks can there and then decide and clear the one-time settlements which are due. Because many of the NPAs or many of these accounts which are waiting for banks to take a call are waiting because nobody wants to take this call. Nobody wants to take a decision on the one-time settlement. There are many other points which I'll add to say, why will an official in a bank now feel encouraged to do it? We've taken adequate steps also to make sure that there shall not be any harassment of the official for the risk that he's taking, because the formulation is as per the checkbox ticking. So that way we expect to have a lot of quick one-time settlements clearing out of the bank's books. The next one is the one which I elaborated. In order to protect decision-making, honest decision-making, because the inputs which are coming are for fear of action. Many of those honest decision-makers in banks are not able to go forward to take a call because they don't know what is involved in the decision making, and therefore there is a stagnation in decision making in banks. We are now making sure that stagnation, that worry, that aversion to risk taking are all being removed. So in order to support decision making and to prevent harassment for genuine commercial decision by bankers, the CBC has issued directions that internal advisory committee, the IAC, in banks to classify cases as vigilance and non-vigilance. Decision on by the IAC and bank chief vigilance officers or the DAs to be treated as final. So because that happens there and then, decision taking risk will not be anymore laden in their heads, so we expect that will protect honest decision making in the banks. We move over to the next point under banks, NBFCs and MSMEs. More credit support for purchase of houses, vehicles, and for consumption goods. How are we doing this? Additional liquidity support for HFCs, home finance corporations, for rupees 20,000 crores by the National Housing Bank, and thereby increasing it to 30,000 crores, which is an increase which we are making now. Partial credit guarantee scheme for purchase of pooled assets of NBFCs and housing finance corporations up to 1 lakh crore to be monitored at the highest level in each of the banks. So NHBs have already settled some issues. As we are announcing this, some of them have already been settled, very clearly showing the NBFCs are receiving liquidity from the banks, and the NBFCs are also moving towards funding of people, giving credits to people. Examples shall be out by late evening today. Some of them will come for you all to double check that this is indeed started moving. And therefore, the NHB related increase in funding from 20,000 crore to 30,000 crore is sure to make a difference, because we've already started moving in that direction, and examples will be available for all of us. Partial credit guarantee scheme, which I've already explained, and that shall be monitored at the highest level. That was announced during budget. RBI has also come out with its notification on it. Through this, we expect many of the assets will get quickly pooled and NBFCs will receive the necessary liquidity. The prepayment notices issued to NBFCs will be monitored by the banks. We move over to the next point, which is NBFCs will now be permitted to use Aadhaar authenticated bank KYC to avoid repeated processes. Because many of the people who came for consultation said what has been proved once is now being repeatedly asked by another agency and a third one and so on. So now what we've said is clearly that Aadhaar can be authenticated by the banks through the KYC, and NBFCs need not ask for one more time proving and repeating the process. This will simplify and quicken up the taking of credit. So this was a major demand by the NBFCs, and therefore we have ensured that we've given them this benefit. The necessary changes have also been made in the PMLA rules for this. Our regulations have also been tweaked to this extent. Then this will enable a easier and faster tracking, onboarding of customers, we think. Another very important fact, all of you all will probably know, quick summary would be, banks are sitting with liquidity, NBFCs have the reach. But this money is not moving to the NBFCs, and as a result, NBFCs are not able to forward credit. This has been the overall simple summary of the situation. What we've now done is to take advantage of the liquidity that which is with the PSBs and the last mile consumer connect that the NBFCs have, so that PSBs can fast track collaboration for loans, particularly to the MSME. So the co-origination is the rules or the requirements of the banks will apply even in the context of an NBFC where the requirement probably do not exist or are hushed. So this will work together and bring in the synergy between the NBFCs and the banks so that where the NBFCs are present, the banks' advantages will reach them, and where there are no NBFCs, the banks themselves can push it forward, and therefore the synergy we think will help in reaching out the end customer quickly with the liquidity which is sitting with the PSBs and the NBFCs which are nicely spread and available everywhere. So the co-origination is a very important measure which even the RBI has gone through, and we are convinced that it's going to work to the favor of the customers. The most important thing again, GST refunds for MSMEs. This was rampantly heard from a lot of MSMEs saying our refunds are stuck, we are not sure when we will get it, will you give it? Now, I would want all of you all to please hear this out clearly. This is clearly time-bound now. All pending GST refunds due to MSMEs, till now that is, shall be paid within 30 days. Everything that is pending since I don't know how many years, from the time of introduction, let us say, of the GST, from then till today, whoever has got a pending refund problem, it will be sorted out within 30 days from today. The government has worked very clearly to clear it all within 30 days. And from now, for future GST refunds, every refund for future GST refund matters will be sorted out within 60 days after it arises. For those which are pending till now, irrespective of 1 year, 6 months, 8 months, whatever, we commit ourselves to clear it within 30 days. And from now, anything which arises newly, within 60 days, the refund for MSMEs will be done so that the MSMEs are not worried about money being stuck somewhere and they're not getting it. So that's cleared. The next one, TREDS you are aware of. Many of these companies are registered under TREDS, and the Prime Minister had very clearly announced, once I recall, that being in TREDS, if there are large companies who owe money to the MSMEs, and if they were in TREDS, that system enabled them, the moment they got into it, that they could discount their bills and get the money even if the company delayed it. TREDS enabled that. Now what we are telling is, for those companies which are registered and a part of the GST, if TREDS uses the GSTN facility, and for every bill that is certified or signature obtained under the GST, the same discounting will be available even for MSMEs, so they need not worry that GST paid, we paid GST tax, but we are not getting the payment from that company who owes us, for whom the supply has been made. So that company's money can now be obtained because the bank will honor the moment the GSTN signature is on it, and MSMEs will be benefiting similarly as many companies benefit out of TREDS. Now, TREDS and GSTN are working together. They can obtain information, and therefore the MSMEs can quickly discount their bills and get the money for their requirement. The next one is a point on MSME definition. That's been one of the worries of MSMEs who approached us. A single definition would serve them better rather than several definitions existing in different acts. So what we have committed here is the MSME Act. In fact, the discussions when it happened, Manya Nitin Gadkari ji was seated with us, even as the consultation happened, and this issue was repeatedly raised. We are addressing that issue because the MSME Act will now go to the Cabinet with inputs taken from all of the ministries concerned, just so there is one definition, one meaningful definition, which probably may not necessarily link it only to turnover, but might take plant and machinery and the optimal capacity and everything else on board and come up with one definition for MSME, through which companies now can feel a lot more at ease with their business activity. So that sooner will go to the Cabinet. The UK Sena Committee has come up with a lot of recommendations, many of which are already on board. We have taken it up and we are already, in fact, some of the suggestions that we've done here for the MSMEs are partly covered by the UK Sena Committee. We shall ensure decisions on recommendations such as on ease of credit, marketing, technology, delayed payments, etc. are all addressed at the earliest. So I want to assure you that many of them have already become a part of what we are speaking about today, but others in the UK Sena Committee report will be taken up. The next we move over to the next silo, which is increasing capital flows and energizing financial markets. And this is also very much in line with what has been indicated in the budget speech. We know that in India, and all of you are equally aware, that in India there is a need for deepening bond markets. And because of that, a lot of issues arise for want of capital and so on. I'll very quickly go through the measures we've already started taking so that bond markets in India get strengthened. In order to improve access to long-term finance, it is proposed to establish an organization to provide credit enhancement for infrastructure and housing projects, particularly in the context of India not having a developmental bank, and also therefore need for us to have an institutional mechanism. This will come of great help. So this would enhance debt flow towards such projects. The name of the organization will be in a day or two revealed, but that organization will take care of providing credit enhancement facility for infrastructure and other housing projects. The government would soon take further action on development of credit default swap markets in consultation with the RBI and SEBI. In order again to improve domestic markets in bonds, Ministry of Finance will work with the RBI to make it more conducive for investors and for bond issuers, as well as facilitate increased trading for price discovery, a lot more open, market-driven kind of a price discovery mechanism. Government has amended the Companies Act, you all know, to remove requirement for creation of debenture redemption reserve, the DRR, of outstanding debentures in respect of listed companies, NBFCs, and for the HFC. Again, continuing on the capital flows, access of Indian companies to the global market. The Depository Receipt Scheme of 2014 is expected to be operationalized soon by SEBI. This will give Indian companies increased access to foreign funds through the ADR and GDR. And this is something which repeatedly industry kept referring to us when they came in for consultation. We clearly yielded on that, and we shall organize ourselves in order to be able to service this. The next is use of Aadhaar-based KYC. Again, a big suggestion which has come during consultations. The consultation that we had with industry, with others, this has come out as one of the big demands. In order to improve market access for the domestic retail investors, Aadhaar-based KYC to be permitted for opening demat accounts and making investment in mutual funds. Necessary notification for amendments in the PMLA rules will be issued sooner. So that takes care of the Aadhaar and KYC. Simplified KYC procedures to improve market access for foreign investors, including the FPIs. So this will be introduced sooner, and that will make the whole process simplified. I go to the next silo, which is there's one more here in the capital flows. Offshore rupee market. I'm sure many of you are interested in it. To bring offshore rupee market to domestic stock exchanges and to permit trading of the US dollar, Indian rupee derivatives in the Gst IFSC, Ministry of Finance is working with RBI to introduce this measure shortly, and this will enable the rupee market to the domestic stock exchanges. We now move to the fifth silo. I've finished with 4 silos. Now the fifth one, is on infrastructure. On infrastructure, again, the discussions went on for a long time. Different sections had different inputs to give us. We are responding to all of them. One which was outstanding was that a lot of payment gets delayed from the government and public sector undertaking. They do the job, but they don't get their money. And it's held with the government departments or with the CPSEs. So now we have very clearly said, delayed payments from government CPSEs to be monitored by Department of Expenditure and performance reviewed by the Cabinet Secretariat with a dashboard in front of it. I must thank Secretary Murmu. Even as we are saying this, he's cleared, I understand, nearly 30,000 crores of payment for all those who are waiting for clearance, which are government departments and also CPSE. So money actually going into the hands of who were waiting for it. Money actually not getting locked up, liquidity reaching where it should reach. And I'm sure with the Cabinet Secretariat monitoring it, Secretary Expenditure should be, except in those cases which are under litigation, clear up all the due payments. So that's happening. The next is very important. It may be an old decision. It may be something which has existed from Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time onwards, and it benefited industries for some time. And after that, God knows what happened. It reached a stagnation. But we are reviving that, and through that, assuring corporate sector that they after arbitration. This is a decision of that time. After arbitration, 75% of the arbitration award will be released. But then what happened when it reached a stagnation? Banks were risk averse. They didn't want to cover them for the delayed period after the arbitration. The interests were mounting. The interests were double of what is otherwise the interest due to them. And because of that, banks were risk averse. They said we wouldn't cover it. Now we are making necessary changes. Secretary Finance will be working together with bank. Secretary DEA will also be working with Reserve Bank and banks to ensure that the risk aversion based on that multiplying interest will be addressed, and we shall immediately move on paying the 75% based on arbitration, and the risk aversion because of the mounting interest will be sorted out. So as a result, many of those cases which after arbitration are still waiting to get their monies will get their 75% straight away. So that's a relief we wish to offer industry. The next one is the issue of the 100 lakh crores for developing infrastructure, which was announced earlier. I just want to very clearly tell you, after the announcement, we've moved forward. An interministerial task force has been formed by the Department of Economic Affairs. Secretary Department of Economic Affairs is here, and they shall finalize the pipeline through which various projects will get funded quickly so that infrastructure work does not get delayed any further. The above initiative is expected to boost growth and create jobs. These projects would be monitored actively to accelerate capital expenditure and investment in the economy. So just not 100 lakh crores, task force is working, it's moving the projects, funding the money which is given, which is already announced, and through this there should be speedy implementation of the infrastructure related money that we've allotted in the budget. I move over to another thing which many of you are waiting, a lot of speculation on it, the automobile sector. The automotive sector has been meeting us both as industry and also individually who came and spoke to us about it. I'm glad to tell you a few things about the responses that we've given in this matter. The BS4 vehicles was a big issue. A lot of companies had provided and started producing, and they are producing it even now. There was this confusion because government wanted to make an announcement as regards encouraging electric vehicles, encouraging electric batteries, and so on. So that confusion we want to dispel completely. BS vehicles which are purchased as up to 31/3, oh God, that reads 30, 31/3/20. We didn't intend till 2030. It is 2020. So BS4 vehicles which are purchased up to 2020 March will all remain operational for their entire period of registration. So it's not as if from 2020 BS4 vehicles are all off the road, not at all. As long as their registration is on, they will be allowed and they will be as good as any other vehicle. The next point, very important again, the revision of one-time registration fee. There was really a lot of heartburn, understandably, on the registration fee being asked up front and so on. We have deferred it till June 2020. There is no need on that to have any worry. The next is, importantly, because inventories are stocking up and piling up in car manufacturing companies. Today, you get a 15% depreciation on them. An additional 15% depreciation on all vehicles, not only this, not only that, on all vehicles, to increase it to 30% acquired during the period from now till March 2020. All vehicles acquired, irrespective of the type, any vehicle acquired from now till March of 2020 will benefit from an additional 15% depreciation, so taking it to a total of 30% depreciation on all of them. We move over to the next. Both EVs and the internal combustion vehicles will continue to be registered. So the fear that what happens to my BS4 vehicle need not be in anybody's mind. The government's focus will be on setting up infrastructure for development of ancillaries and components, including batteries for export. But both EVs and ICVs will continue to be registered. The next one, in order to boost demand, government shall lift the ban on purchase of new vehicles to replace all old vehicles by government departments. So government departments, which till now had a ban on them that they can't buy vehicles even to replace the old ones, will now be actively told to please replace your old ones. Please replace your old one, go buy new vehicles, bring them on. So the inventory to that extent will be, first we start the charity at home. We shall buy all the vehicles which we need to replace those vehicles which are with us. So money will go into the car manufacturers' hands, and therefore I hope after that the component manufacturers will also get paid for all the supplies that they've made. So that's an important point I want to draw your attention to for boosting demand. The next one in that, again to boost demand, government will consider various measures including a scrappage policy. I would have really gone ahead with introducing the benefits which can come out of a scrappage policy, but only because we need to create the necessary infrastructure for it.